The Clyde has always been central to Glasgow's identity and has given life to the city in so many ways, but not without some serious side effects.
Emissions from transport and waste from local factories have from the 19th century onwards caused heavy pollution, which has in turn affected the biodiversity of the river.
I want to delve a little further into the topic of industrial growth and its effect on the environment. I'm especially interested in how artists have represented this subject. To find out more, I'm going to be exploring some interesting objects right here in the collections of Glasgow museums.
Our journey starts in the Riverside Museum, where two objects in particular can help us understand the origins of the Clyde's relationship with industrialisation.
Here we have a model of the hull of the paddle steamer Comet built in 1812, and next to it is a much more worked up model built in the 1870s. Now, they may not look very special, but in fact the Comet was no ordinary boat.
So I asked Emily Malcolm, Curator of Transport and Technology, to tell me more.
And how does steam power then change the shipping industry?
Well, in Scotland, in the UK, in Europe, Comet is the beginning of commercial, easy, integrated mass transit, and so significant and really the spark that ignites the fire that becomes the industrial powerhouse that's Glasgow and the west coast of Scotland for the rest of the 19th century and well into the 20th century. Very, very quickly that technology was taken by others and developed into ever bigger, ever faster, ever more powerful vessels with cheaper tickets.
What was the environmental impact of all of this?
So I've never come across any indication that they had a concern about environmental impact in the slightest, unfortunately. Comet and her successors, they're part of that use of fossil fuels for motive power that we can't look on in the same way anymore. But in the 19th century, these were limitless resources. The growth of industry based around this engineering expertise, this shipbuilding skill that sees this huge rise in Glasgow's growth as an industrial city, a tenfold increase in 100 years. And it's that population and the industry, the tanning, the metalworking, the engineering that create the pollution, really ruined the Clyde as a natural river for most of the latter part of the 19th century.
Comet had a short life, but it was a symbol of huge change. The age of steam had dawned on the Clyde.
It was a significant moment, which may explain why the Scottish painter John Knox chose to immortalise it in a remarkable landscape painting. I went to the Glasgow Museum Resource Centre to have a look.
Now we don't know for sure, but it's presumed that this is the Comet right here, just left to the centre of the painting, near to the more traditional sailboats. Overall, there's a real sense of calm about this painting, but look more closely and actually this is a landscape on the brink of transformation. Now for me, the really interesting thing about this painting is not the signs of change, but the resistance to it. Knox is clearly interested in the shift from wind to steam power, but the steamboat is still pictured in the distance. Trees and hills still dominate. So he allows technology to come into the painting, but it's still as though he's keeping it at arm's length.
It's as if he is saying human activity can't really be transforming the landscape, can it? These questions remind me of when I take a long train journey and look out of the window and the countryside still seems very green. At times like these, it can be easy to think that we're exaggerating the effects of climate change. But of course, there's so much that I'm not seeing. So much that, like Knox, I'm either pushing to the background or simply can't see. Landscapes can give a very good impression of being healthy when actually they aren't. We can't see decreasing fish populations just by looking at the water. It's very hard to register what some people call the slow violence of climate change.
For John Knox, the steamboat probably seemed like something the landscape could accommodate. In retrospect, we know this is probably not the case. After steamboats came steam trains. After trains, cars. After cars, planes. Humans have come to dominate the landscape.
Many 19th century landscape painters responded to industrialisation by just ignoring it. Others represented it but pushed it to the background. This is especially true of many of the artists associated with Impressionism, examples of which can be found at Glasgow's Kelvingrove Art Gallery and Museum.
When thinking about industrialisation, carbon consumption and air pollution in relation to art, few would think of Impressionism. For most, Impressionism means dappled sunlight in rural gardens or Parisian parks. However, the industrial suburb was a key theme in Impressionist painting, and artists like Monet and Signac would leave the centre of Paris, where they would paint the industrial Seine. And the River Seine, like the Clyde in Glasgow, was central to Paris's economy and also to its identity.
I'm standing in front of Georges Seurat's small painting, The Riverbanks. It's on a completely different scale to John Knox's painting and very different in style. And yet I think the mood of the painting is actually quite similar.
It draws you in with the promise of a sunny day on the banks of a river. But there in the distance are a line of factory chimneys, releasing, like the funnel on the comet, plumes of grey smoke.
So it's often noted how in Impressionist paintings, factory chimneys can be mistaken for trees. Now, I'm not sure whether this line in Pissaro's painting is a tree or a chimney. There seems to be smoke coming out of it, but it could also be read as a cloud. Possibly this is deliberate. Pissarro is finding a way of naturalising signs of industry and bringing them into the field of landscape painting. On the one hand, I really admire what Seurat and Pissarro were doing, trying to bring industry into the frame. On the other hand, in some of their paintings, it does feel as though the subject is somewhat distant, as though they're engaging and disengaging with it at the same time, which feels all too familiar. When we look at landscapes of the 19th century, a period of great industrial expansion, we need to ask ourselves, how is change being represented? Virginia Woolf once described paintings as silent kingdoms. And when we're dealing with subjects such as industrialisation and pollution, I think that silence is really important. I can see the smoke coming out of these trains here, but I can't hear them and I can't smell them. And it makes it much easier, therefore, to ignore their environmental impact.
Visualising industry and its effects on the environment represents a challenge. In the end, we can't expect a painting to give us the whole picture. But we can read these objects as reminders that we need to bring our environment firmly into the foreground of our attentions to create sustainable landscapes of change.